I'll say this next part on camera because is it starting now?
Yep.
Okay. Well, in light of what you said, I think we're very grateful for being asked, because what it does, there's an old saying, when one teaches, two learn. Not that we're here to teach, but when you prepare to share something, you go through a deep study of your own, or in this case, we're doing it together. It's a study, and a reflection time that we had together. And so that's just a blessing to us. So whatever you get out of it, we're gonna get more out of it. That's not like some boast. That's just the nature of how it works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Someone want to pray to kick us off? Great.
Our Father in heaven, we're so grateful to be here tonight, and thank you for the Kodinskys for coming here to talk to us about family planning. I pray that all of us have our open hearts and open minds and open ears to hear what you have to say for us, and thank you for your love and for being with us always. Love you in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. We got a few chuckles out of the name, family planning.
Yeah.
So just a quick bit about us. We're Michael and Sarah Kodinsky. I got that Russian last name. I was born in Russia. It's not a great thing to admit these days, but that's my story. I'm sticking to it. We've been married for 23 years. It'll be 23 years a week from tomorrow. 99, we were married. I was telling you guys earlier, we came back from mission field, got married, went back to the mission field. That was our first year of marriage was on the mission field, kind of crazy. We got 3 sons. First one was born in 03, and then 05 and 08, so they're like 18, 16, 14 right now, respectively. Oldest one just went to college, left the house, and that's been an interesting time of transition. So when we talk about family planning, that's a transitionary time. It's been a very transitionary year for us for a bunch of reasons. So.
Yeah, so we had talking about family planning, we had our first child about 4 years after we got married. And we kind of started trying or thinking like, okay, let's go ahead and we want to have a baby. About 3 years after we got married, our first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage after about 8 or 10 weeks. And so that was really hard and just kind of like a scary thing to go through, especially being our first pregnancy. We didn't know what to expect and what was going to come next. But then we were able to have a successful pregnancy and had our first child in 03. So it was a fun time. Most of our peer friends were also starting families, and so it was a great time just kind of sharing that together. It had its ups and downs because all of us had different struggles with starting a family, and false starts or difficult starts, and just kind of going through it together was a special time. It was very bonding, and we're still close to a lot of those people 23 years later that we were close to then, so that's a really special thing to look forward to. But we thought we'd start out with a few laughs, and so I don't think
many. Is it supposed to be funny?
Yeah, I don't think many of you in here have kids yet, so this is something to look forward to, right? So the top 10 painfully funny new parent moments. So we just thought we'd kind of get you in the mood for what it will be like to plan your family together, right?
Play these movies out of your mind.
So number 1, you find yourself alone in the kitchen at night, softly singing Old MacDonald as you do dishes. Number 2, you find yourself saying, "Oh, good, it's just vomit."
Could be.
I have like a story for every single one, but we're going to move past them. Okay, number 3, your husband asks you if you want to spend time together, and you think he said cookie instead. So you're disappointed because you would prefer the cookie. Number 4, you have groceries in the cart, and you're totally okay with leaving them in the aisle so you can get your screaming child out of the store. That's totally okay with you. Number 5, you buy clothes for yourself based on how easily puke will wash out of them. Definitely true story. Yes.
Wow.
Number 6, you have discovered a new workout routine that includes reps with the baby in the bucket seat. So, the little car seat carrier.
I will say that's real. If you're a guy, and you can be a lady as well, but if you like to work out, when you have a kid, up until they get too big, like mine, you can do a lot with them. You can do thighs, tries, shoulders, just standing in line at Disney. Like,
that was the big thing at Disney.
And it's bombing. That's real.
So, yeah. And then number 7, you hide to eat a snack because you don't want to share it. Mm-hmm.
I still do that. I hid some
Yes.
energy drinks the other day because my kids drinking like their water. I'm like, no, I get tired. I need those for energy.
All right, and number 8, you consider 7 a.m. sleeping in. You will be like so excited when you get to sleep until 7.
Yeah, right.
Number 9, you pretend to use the bathroom just so you can play on your phone for a few minutes without being bothered.
Keep it real here.
And number 10, you cannot imagine loving anything more than this tiny human that has taken over your world. So it's a really special time. We had 3 children under 5 at one point, so we had them all really close together, and it was total chaos having 3 boys like that. When I found out the 3rd was a boy on the ultrasound table, I did start crying a little bit because I just couldn't imagine another boy in the mix. But because they're like, it's not addition with boys, it's
Multiplication.
Yeah, it's multiplication. It's like exponential. Like so much more energy, but it's
Probably the same
just-
with girls. We just wouldn't know.
Yeah, we just don't know
It's
about
just
that.
a number.
Yeah.
Yeah. The more there are, the more they
Mhm.
multiply. Like Gremlins. You guys you may not know that movie,
You
but
should go back and watch it, yeah.
maybe.
Mhm.
So as we were thinking about all this, we kind of boiled it down to 3 words that are kind of themes. And so, and in general, I find it's just helpful when passing on advice or life experience, whatever. It's just all we try to do is give you a lens. Like, hey, we've been there, done that. We've seen things. So this is just how some lenses that God has taught us to see through. And so the 3 words are surrender, sacrifice, and support. Those are the 3 things that I feel like are just thematically dead center when you cross that chasm and you make that transition to having kids, and then the many transitions that follow, such as we just had one move out, we got one entering high school this year, the last one, it just, there's always transitions. So surrender, sacrifice, and support. I'll never forget, like, I don't know if you guys maybe have done this, but somewhere early on in my Christian walk, I've been a disciple 25 years, but somewhere around year 4, 5, or 6, I don't remember exactly when, but around that time, I remember that the church leaders were like, hey, let's have a theme for the year, and I went off and talked to God and figured out what I thought I heard was surrender, which is a very biblical theme. It's all throughout the Bible, obviously. And now as we were preparing this, it hit me like, oh, that's right around the time that we were having our first kid, somewhere either right before or right after, and that theme has stuck with me ever since then. God didn't say, oh yeah, that was my theme for you that year. Now it's going to be like surrender has just become a huge theme for me personally. And I think there's nothing more there's nothing that's going to take you to that place if you are a God follower and a Bible reader, then when you have a kid, when you have children for the first time, then surrender, because it's like it's this thing that you care so much about that you think you can control, but ultimately, you can't. So here's a couple of scriptures. These are from the New Century Version, NCV, which is a translation I really like. This is Proverbs 16, the first 3 verses. It says, people may make plans in their minds, but only the Lord can make them come true. So talk about family planning, right? We make these plans, but who ultimately is going to decide? Some people have trouble having children. Some people have a miscarriage. Others have some other challenges. Others have a great kid the first time, and then, or maybe they have a kid that's not 100% healthy or neurotypical or whatever it may be. But people make the plans, but only the Lord can make them come true. You may believe you are doing right, but the Lord will judge your reasons. And that's a good one to read in different translations, but it's not like he's judging you, but it's more like he's going to help you. He's going to really help you kind of discern what's really in your heart. You may have your own ideas, but he will make it clear what's really going on, right? And a lot stirs in the heart as you get ready to have kids and start having kids, as I'm sure you can imagine, right? And then finally, verse 3, depend on the Lord in whatever you do, and your plans will succeed, right? Planning, we're talking about family planning. That's a verse you've heard a lot, but when you stop and think about it, its implications, it's deep. I've been reflecting on it a lot because I've been through a lot of transitions in life. And then in Proverbs 19:21, it says, people can make all kinds of plans, but only the Lord's plan will happen.
Yeah. So, when we thought about the concept of surrender and planning your family, we were thinking that it's just a really great concept to study out and to really embrace, because it's just going to take a lot of surrender to start a family. As those scriptures talked about, that you can make all kinds of plans, and I'm a very big planner. I love to be in control, and I like to know exactly what's going to happen and plan it out in advance. And so we just thought of a few things that you have to surrender as you prepare to have kids, and so just some things to think through. So you have to surrender their health, and you don't know what God has planned. Will they be healthy or not? Your own health. Having kids takes a toll on both of you, especially the woman, but takes a big toll health-wise, and so you don't know what to expect in that area. Your child's temperament. So it really can have a big impact on your daily life, what your child's temperament is, whether they're, kind of a easygoing temperament or colicky at first, or have a strong will. You just don't know what to expect. And so going into parenting and planning for that, I think it's a really great idea to just pray for surrender and just say, God, help me to be surrendered to your will. Then Michael pointed out, really learning to compromise with one another about things is a great thing to pray for going into parenting and planning to have a family, because there's going to be so much opportunity for just being able to be flexible, like, okay, we think differently about this, how are we going to approach it?
Specifically, I was thinking about it like from the perspective of parenting styles. Again, when you start to become parents, what you'll realize in practice is that, okay, you're gonna have some fundamental differences, just like you might have fundamental differences about how you spend money or other things. You figure out where the two become one, and you figure out marriage, and your parenting style is gonna be largely dictated by how you're parented, one way or another. And that's usually different, because you're usually pretty different people in some ways. And so so it just takes some real surrender in terms of learning how to compromise as husband and wife.
Yeah. And then the last thing is very similar, but it's about expectations. And I'm sure you've talked a lot in a married class about expectations. Like, it's a huge thing in marriage.
Huge words.
It's also a huge thing in parenting, because you walk into parenting and you both think the same way, probably, like, right? Everybody grew up the way I grew up, but no. We have very different backgrounds and very different homes we came from. And so, those are informed by our families, but even they're really informed by society a lot. You have no idea how much it's really your whole life been told to you that this is what you should expect from your kids. So I'm sure you've thought this. I thought this so many times. When I'm a parent, I will never, or, when I'm a parent, my kids will never or will always, right? The things that you think going into it, you just really got to surrender, because you just don't know what's really going to be like, and even, what your kids' personality. So some of our best friends here at North River taught us something when our kids were all little. They had a kind of saying between them. They would say, riding the EAC. So I don't know if you've seen Finding Nemo, but the EAC, the Eastern Australian Current, and those awesome turtles who were so chill,
laid back turtles. They would say that.
They were just like, dude, we're riding the EAC. And so it was like their code word for each other, like, we're surrendering this one. Like, there's nothing we can do here. We're just riding the current,
Which is to say, going with the flow.
Going with the flow. So that was always a good exercise for us, of just surrendering, that the Lord's purpose will prevail. We can't always control everything.
And I'll just wrap up the idea of surrender with this verse that Sarah actually pulled out, and I thought it was great. It's not one I know really well, but Jeremiah 10:23 says, in the NCV, it says, Lord, I know that our lives don't really belong to us. We can't control our own lives. Again, that's one translation. You can read it differently in others, but the idea is that, again, surrender is so much about the fact that we really aren't in control. So, surrender is a huge topic. I can't sum it up in one liner, but that's a pretty close approximation to that. To what that summary might be is, like, we think we're in control, but God keeps reminding us we're not. And in my opinion, I've only lived 47 years. I'm sure I'll learn some things in the next however many God gives me, but parenting is the one area where surrender is needed the most. Because it's like this, because like your spouse is an adult, he or she's got some things figured out, you help each other, but like these things are, they got nothing figured out. And yet they're gonna have their own personality real quick, and then it gets gets crazy from there. So sacrifice to me is a concept that's actually kind of in a link with surrender. There's a little bit of an overlap there, but here's a great verse. You guys know this passage well. This is the New Living Translation from Philippians 2, beginning in verse 4. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. Though he was God, made me think about how we become like gods to our children. Small g. No, I'm not saying anything crazy there, but someone taught me that early on. Is like, he said the father is like the first God our kid will ever know. What is that? Think about that for a second, right? We love our baby deeply and unconditionally, much like God, albeit nothing. I mean, not comparing, but as far as they know, right? We will do anything for him or her. We'll sacrifice. We'll lay down our lives. Our baby depends on us for literally everything. He or she cannot stay alive apart from us. I can go on and on, but now when they're 18, different story. when they're 6, different story. But when they're that first year, 2, 3, whatever, it's as close to it's the first God they can ever know. So though he was God, he did not consider that something to cling to, right? Instead, it says he took the humble position of a slave. What's a slave? A slave is someone who, in their role, in their life, they've accepted the fact, like it or not, that they are here to sacrifice their life for others. They don't live their own life. They live to serve others. Let me just tell you, that's a lot of what parenting feels like. Not, oh, you're a slave, like in a negative way, but in a humble servant Jesus kind of way. We live to serve others. However many you have, 1, 2, 3 in our case, for a long time. And as time goes on, you'll serve them less and less. Or rather, I should say, you'll serve them in different ways. Your service will change. Instead, he took the humble position of a slave. That passage in Philippians 2 is actually really insightful about parenting. In that way, especially early on.
I brought a few books to share with you guys that you might be interested in if you're becoming parents anytime soon. Some of our favorites. And these two I'll show you. This is a great one with scriptures to memorize with your kids. But these two guys are brothers that wrote these 2 books. And Shepherding a Child's Heart was one of our favorites when the kids were little, like preschool and elementary age. And then Age of Opportunity is really awesome for parenting teenagers. And
although that author, Paul David Tripp, note down his name, he's brilliant and he provides a lot of parenting stuff. That book happens to be tailored to teenagers, parents of teenagers, but he's got stuff just on parenting in general. He's brilliant.
But on this topic of sacrifice, when we were talking last week, we were on vacation, and I said, what will we go back and tell ourselves if we, 23 years ago, like to be ready to have a family, planning a family. And Michael said, I would just say, be prepared, for sacrifice, like prepare your heart so that you can be ready.
It's usually harder for the guy in my experience.
Yeah.
But that's how the experience I've had. So.
But this quote from this book really helped us a lot with his teen parents too. But he said, secretly in our hearts, many of us want life to be a resort. A resort is a place where you are the one who is served. Your needs come first, and you do only what you want to do when you want to do it. And many of us live for comfort and bring this entitlement mentality to our parenting. And I think that just was it really helped us to, we were super convicted. We're like, that's so true. And one of the things that we sin the most in as parents is because of that, because we are frustrated that we have to sacrifice, And so I think just preparing your heart for family planning is like really preparing your heart to be like Jesus, and be able to lay down your life for your kids. So some of the sacrifices we thought of that we make and that we would encourage you guys to prepare to make as parents, like sleep is the first thing that goes, right?
That's just obvious.
And then time and your money, right? Just thinking about like where are we at with our money, and it pulls on your heartstrings, and so when you start having kids and there's more money demands, comfort, your appreciation. I mean, they're not going to appreciate you for a long time. And so that's really, it sounds funny, but it's true. It can really bring out the worst in you as a person when you're not being like Jesus and really laying down your life and saying, it's okay, I will serve you. You can throw a fit. I love you anyway, right?
Wow.
And then career planning is a sacrifice, as a woman thinking about what am I going to be prepared to do after I have this baby? It takes a toll on me, and what do I want to do, and working together to have a great plan and expectation, and also knowing that it's not going to always be what you think it's going to be either, right?
And on that note, the career planning, we've seen both in our own experience and the experience of other couples that we know, that you don't know what to expect. You may be in a scenario where you're a working mom and you're like, I'm gonna have this baby, it's gonna be great, I'm gonna have to take 3 months, 6 months, whatever for maternity, and then I'm gonna get right back to it. And then 2 weeks in, you're like, I don't know how I'm ever gonna go back to work. I don't want to leave this child. Or some people have the opposite. Oh, now that we're gonna have a baby, I want to take the next 5 years off. I don't need to work. I really just want to focus on this baby. And then you realize some women are just much more called to work outside the home, and that's not right or wrong. It's just what, and so again, their expectation may have to be changed. Those are just two examples. There may be other variables, but just again, surrender and be ready to sacrifice that, and be flexible, because you just don't know. You think you know, but you just don't know until you're there. It's just life, right? And on the money front too, the money point is just one of those, because money is one of the big three things you might have heard in marriage that you have sort of always want to make sure you're dealing with openly and honestly and deeply: money, sex, and what's the third one? In-laws? I forget. I'm trying to remember. There's three.
Probably,
money and sex are two of them. So go figure.
Yeah.
And then the third S was support. This idea of support. You'll really want to, these are just some things that you'll obviously want to lean on heavily in a whole new way as parents. And obviously it all starts with your walk with God, right? But once you have the baby is not the time to take what might be a so-so walk with God and take it up to where it needs to be, to ramp it up to that deep, heartfelt level. That isn't, if you don't, I mean, maybe your walk with God is already, as great as it's ever been, but if it's so-so and you're one, because we go through those ebbs and flows and seasons, and you're getting ready to have a baby, that's the time to say, all right, God, I got to clean you like never before, because they come into it that way. Kind of like, start having a baby is like starting a marathon. Anyone can start a marathon, but if you haven't had training for it, you're gonna fall on your face and be winded by the side of the road, and not able to do your part. So spiritually, you walk with God. That verse that I read earlier: depend on the Lord in whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. But depend on the Lord is a nice throw out little bumper sticker. But what does that really look like when the baby poop hits the fan? It's like it gets starts to get real. The next one is depend on each other. Support comes from each other, right? And your marriage, same thing. Your marriage, if it's so now and you're about to have a baby, now is the time. Yesterday or now is the time to work on that, because once the baby comes, that's not going to be the time to go, all right, let's get close now so we can be really tied in this together as we help raise this child, and endure these new challenges that, new opportunities and new, boundary hurdles that we didn't even know were going to be, what they were going to be like. Like, if you're going to be able to support each other, that marriage has to be strong. You've heard this before, but this is just where it just starts to get more real when you think about, all right, we're about to bring a child into the world in, whatever, 4 months, a year, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And then,
Never handle her.
oh yeah. The other thing under support that we felt has been really important for us as we started a family and continued a family is the community, and having a community of support, the community of the Spirit. But really, you always hear the saying, it takes a village. It's not just cliche. It's so important as you have children to build your village, and something that we've always taken very seriously. We've been very intentional about building that village from the very beginning. And I mentioned earlier, when we started having children, we were like doing it with our friends who were of the same mindset and faith, and like, we're doing this together. We felt like we had to be really intentional. After you have kids, you always feel like you're just too busy, right? Every stage of life. Before we had kids, we thought we were too, but like, once you have kids, you also think, but you have to be really intentional about mentorship. And so we always really seeking out couples who we respected their marriage, we respected their parenting. We're like, we want to learn from them, but you really have to go after it. You really have to make an extra effort, especially once you start having kids. But that's made all the difference for us. You know, we found great couples who are so sweet and willing to come to our house when the babies were sleeping, you know, to help us and talk with us. But one thing I really learned as a principal was to get to find mentors who will get to know you when times are good, get to know your kids when times are good. Just have dinner together, have fun, because when you hit the bumps, is not the time to find somebody for help. You know, it's great to already know people and for them to know you. And so then when you're having a little breakdown, you can call, right? So that was really helpful.
It's no different than your walk with God or with your spouse. Like if those aren't strong when you're about to go into a storm or in your time of trials, which having a baby is like in many ways, then in the same way, mentors are great. You build that up when it's just smooth sailing, just to, you know, again, so you have that comfort level to go to them when things get crazy.
And we've always had a you know, conviction to have multiple people who know us, and so kind of just different people. I mean, different people have different personality types and can give you different things. And then our community of peers. I mean, I remember one time we got with the Mackenzies when the kids were little, and we're talking to them. We just are having a hard time finding a mentor, and they're like, well, who are your friends? You know, your friends help you too. And they do. Our friends are our village, and we've always been very intentional, even with people who live far away, who we respect. We said, we're going to stay close. We literally would take our kids to Western Massachusetts every year when they were younger and visit our best friends there that we respect so much in their faith, just so that we could stay close. And that has paid off. Our kids have grown up knowing each other. So I just really encourage you to be intentional. Pick those people who you say, I want those to be my kids' aunts and uncles in the faith, and just make it happen. You know, it will pay off in the long run, even when you start when they're babies. So you're building your village, even from before you get pregnant. So
and a miracle prayer, answer prayer, almost not really a prayer, because I didn't have the cojones to pray this prayer, because it just didn't seem, but that couple who's in the ministry, and we're leading a church in Western Mass, are literally moving here this year to take on a ministry role in a sister church nearby, and so we're going to be within a short drive of them now, and that's just like, you know, couldn't even imagine that. It's just a gift from God. So so to sum it up, surrender, sacrifice, support. I don't know how that's hitting you guys, or how you're hearing it, but it could sound pretty intense. I think some of the stuff you said, if you really take it at face value, it is intense. Because that's what having a baby is. It's not a decision to change jobs. It's not a decision to go get Chinese when you thought you were going to get pizza. It's not a small decision, right? It's huge. It's one of the biggest things you'll ever decide to do and embark upon. And you know, but here's a few other S words to kind of leave you on a different kind of note, I guess, perhaps, than the intensity that we just conveyed. Saturate, soak, and stay in the moment. You're gonna hear this. You probably already heard it. It goes by so fast. Like, I feel so cliche and so boomer when I say that. I'm not a boomer, but you know what I mean? Like that, oh yeah, the old guy's telling, like, because that's what people used to tell me. And I'd be like, oh yeah, you're right. And I was like, had like a 1-year-old. I'm like, okay, sure. It's been a year and I'm about to pull my hair out. Like, I'm like, but it does. It goes by so fast, and human nature makes you wish your 1-year-old was a 10-year-old, because you want to be throwing ball with them and having these deep conversations or whatever, or the 10-year-olds and 18-year-olds, so you're having these deep life talks or whatever it might be that you want to have with your kid. But you can't make him 18 when he's 1, and you can't make him 1 when he's 18 or she.
Yeah.
That's more speaking last, right? Like, so now we get to enjoy other people's babies, you know, but it reminds us how much we miss those moments. But just soak in, stay and soak in each moment, those months leading up to having that child. Like, you'll never have that time again. It's a unique time of life. Do your best to be present in that. And then just spend, their S word, spend your time in awe and wonder. Like marriage, but in a whole different kind of level. Having that baby, that child, the first one especially, because it's all new, but each one, you look in that baby's eyes, you cuddle with him or her, you feed them, you clean them, you hold their little tiny finger, and you see God, and you see through God's eyes, and you see God and experience God, and you understand what the word worship means on a whole nother level.
For sure.
Just like many other things in life will do that to you too, but very few are like that, as impactful and as awe-inspiring as having a child.
Yeah.
So, good luck with your family planning.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're gonna open it up for a time of like Q&A. If you have any burning questions, throw hands.
Yes, right.
Okay. Okay, so y'all said that it was year 3 in your marriage, so you decided you wanted to have children. Like, what was that like? Okay, husband, okay, wife. All right, now it's year 3. But like, what made y'all decide that?
Like, how do you
time-
know?
Yeah, that time you wanted to have kids. Because we're about to hit year 3. I'm not saying that, you know.
Is the question sort of like, how do you know when you're, or like, what is it?
Well, I can share what we went through
Yeah.
too. I mean, I was like more excited to start. I was like, okay, I want to have kids now because my best friend had decided that, you know, they were going to start having kids. And that was really influencing me, I think. But I was also just more excited naturally. Like, I was more drawn to having children. And I think he just wasn't as much. And so.
She was raised by an elder in the church and I was not. That might have something to do with it. We have different types of upbringing, you know?
And so I was patient, and we talked and we prayed about it, but like, not going to do something unless we're both 100% there. And really cool story is that we live near a walking path, and he was out on the walking path one morning, like he usually did,
Like
when I
my prayer
prayed.
place, yeah.
He was praying, and he came across a little tiny baby red Converse sneaker,
Like a Chuck Taylor, a little red Chuck Taylor, like about that big.
and he just felt like, wow, God is like telling me that, you know, and it really changed his, I mean, I don't think that changed his heart, but it was like a turning point for him. He just
It was
started
an
praying
encounter
about
for
it
sure,
more.
yeah.
But I just had to really be patient and pray that God would change his heart and get him ready, because I didn't want to rush into something that he wasn't ready to do. So, yeah, that's our personal story.
Yeah, but I think I like the way you point out the example of like, not the example, but like the illustration in our case of how her friend, like, you know, and I see that now because we mentor a lot of young couples and like women especially, I think they want to have kids with their friends, and that's a great, again, that's part of what we spoke to earlier about that village, that's, you know, community of support, community of the spirit. Like, you can, that's where you can have some say and some control, provided God does the rest and everybody has their baby, you know, but like, you can at least try for that and be like, oh, our kids are gonna grow up together. I literally changed the name of one of our kids from what I wanted to name him to something else, to my second choice, because my best friend, that same couple that she's referring to, already had dibs on the name Caleb. I wanted Caleb.
We were all fighting over names, you know.
And so, you know, and cause I thought we'd be raising our kids together forever. I didn't know we were gonna move away from Boston like 2-3 years later, but 2 years later, yeah. But,
Any other questions?
So, you know, you said you talked a lot about sacrifice, and one of them being time for you two together, and that's probably one of my biggest fears. Just being open. So like when I have a kid, like I'm not gonna have my wife all to myself, you know, a little bit. So, you know, kind of just talk about that.
That's a heavy one. Let me think about that for a second.
I feel like one child, I really appreciate that God, you know, he promises he won't give us more than we can handle. And some people he does give 2 or 3 at once, but most of us he only gives us 1 at a time, and that's helpful. But one child was not earth-shattering for us, you know. It definitely got more intense with 2 and 3 in that area of, but we learned as we went. And so I feel like with one child, I mean, you can do it together is actually very bonding. You know, us being with the baby together in the night and him getting up and helping with the baby, it was very bonding for us. but we had a pretty strong marriage going into it, and so we enjoyed doing it together, you know. And so I don't feel like the one child really pulled us apart. We were able to find ways for it to totally be bonding and fun, you know. It was like a new adventure. Like we told you earlier, we spent our first year of marriage overseas. Well, this was our next adventure, you know. Like, oh my goodness, this little baby we get to have together. But we also, we're pretty intentional about planning dates still and leaving the baby, and, you know, the baby not becoming our total world either. Like, Michael has always been my number one, and then the children are next, you know. And so, but I don't feel like that first year the baby divided us too much.
Yeah, that's a great question you ask. I appreciate that. That's real and that's deep. And part of what you'll see too is, again, God's brilliant in his design. He's not, you know, he knows what he's doing, right? And so he eases you into it. He doesn't throw you in the deep end. That is, unless you choose to go adopt a teenager or a 10-year-old or something. And then people do that, and that's a different track they're on, and that's beautiful too in its own way. But God's design is, all right, wade in the shallow end, wade in the kiddie pool. A baby is, yeah, in some ways, baby's very hard. Like, our kids don't keep us up every night these days, our teens. Sometimes they do. But the baby will keep you literally below sleep at first. And then I'll transition from losing sleep to other things that you do. But back to your question, think of it as you're not losing time with your wife, or certainly losing your wife in any way. You're gaining a woman that's an evolved woman, because a mom is an evolved human being than just a woman who's just a wife. Evolved, I mean, I don't know how else to say it. Like, it's another element of, and I just keep, the word always comes back, it's worship. Like you discover things about God through that process. And I don't know, you can, whatever, this will be on the recording, but breasts become a whole new thing when they're providing milk. And it's deep, and it's like, and I'm like your average guy, like you love breasts because God gave you this thing, but then, like, it takes, again, it's not, I don't see it as worse. Oh, now there's milk coming out of them all the time, or what? Like, it's, I mean, you can see it that way if that's your lens, but the lens I suggest you take on is, wow, God, look, you know.
That's
We were hanging out with some young married couples with kids recently, and this came up about, no, I'm not going to go there right now. Okay. We'll do it off the record if you want to. Well, I'll put the mouth going right there. But I hope that helps. Like, it's a choice. You choose how, you know, I teach this idea that's not my idea, but it's one of my dad lines that I tell my kids all the time is, whatever you see, whatever you look for is what you'll see. You always see what you look for. And so it has to do with our, you know, how we either by default or how we train our minds to, you know, see something. And so this is a choice you get to have, to see your wife becoming now she's not just your wife. It's like, you know, it's like in a job. You're not just entry level, now you're whatever, you're progressing. She's becoming a mom, and it's brilliant, it's beautiful, and it's you enjoy time together. Yeah, you won't have as much time to just do what the two of you want, but you'll spend time doing other things together.
Thank you.
How do you guys divvy up the responsibilities with the kid?
Well, the early feeding was clear.
Yeah.
That part was clear.
Oh.
How do we divvy it up?
Interesting. I think, you know, our natural tendency was that I took more than half of the responsibilities with the babies. It's interesting though, you know, now we have boys, and if they've gotten older, that's changed a lot through the years. But when they were little, it was mostly me. I did stay home full time with them until they were all in elementary school at least. I work full time now, but when they were little, I did like a lot of little part-time things. Had a little bit of a hard time being 100% at home. I was always kind of like doing this and that. But Michael was he's an amazing servant. And so he's always offering, you know, always would offer. And that really meant a lot to me, that he was always trying to help. But I took the lead, I think, when they were little. But now that they're teenagers, he really takes on more. than I do, I think, just all the conversations and all the stuff, so.
Some things teenage boys are saying and doing, she don't want to hear it. And
I'm
not,
out.
And but that's a long way off for you guys. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
What's a way, I know you mentioned, like you jokingly mentioned, but it's true, like the early years or right after newborn stage with feeding, like what's a way for, because I've heard different things from different friends who have had babies, like it's hard for the dad to feel bonded with the baby because, you know, it relies so much on mom. So what are some things that you can do in the early stages to help with that? Like what can dad do to get bonded?
Well, for one thing, the mom can pump and put it in a bottle, and then you can feed the baby with the bottle, and that's, you know, the next best thing. Just on that level right there, just on the feeding, you can take turns feeding if you do that, if you pump and have a bottle.
He would change all the diapers. I mean, he was working full time, so I felt like this is my job. I'm taking care of baby, you take care of work. But when he was there, he would jump right in, bottles, bathing, and all of that. And then one thing that was always a pet peeve of mine was to say that he was babysitting. Like when I would go out with my friends, I was like, no, he's the dad. He's with the kid, you know? This is not babysitting, he's the dad. So he was, and I had to, I think a lot of women had struggle with this too. I had to really let go and surrender. Like he can do it, you know? And trust. I always said to my friends, like, God gives extra angels around dads when they get left with the kids. I don't need to know all the stuff that happens, you know?
So the best, and the other thing I'll add to that question is, when they're a baby, the beautiful thing is you can do whatever, let's say we're talking about Darius, whatever Darius loves to do that a baby could participate in, like maybe not a mountain bike trail ride at 2 weeks old, but for me, I still remember, this is a vivid memory I have, plus I have a photo of it, so that helps, but my memory, but like, we're sitting there in the hospital room, and I got the TV on, and I'm like, looking down at my son going, boy, we're watching our first sports center together, you know, and he was, you know, he was born at the end of April, so the baseball season had just started. We're from Boston, so I'm wearing the Braves hat, but really I'm a Red Sox fan at heart, and the Red Sox had a chance to, you know, they almost went to the World Series that year, and it was like, you know, it was just like going through this with my son, you know, just those kind of things. That's just one example, but like, because to me that's something I care about, something I love, and he could be right there cuddling my arm, and in my mind, he and I are watching Sports Center together. He don't know, but that I'm bonded to him, because to me, there's my new love of my life, this, you know, second love of my life, if you will, but then we're doing something, and I'm just chilling, having my time, like, you know, together though, with him, or her, if he has a her. So just whatever, you know, whatever you can do that you feel that gives you joy and love and fills your heart with whatever, if it's sports or just music or whatever, or going for a drive on a beautiful day, and you can strap him or her in the car seat, and you're taking him for a drive, and you point out the trees to him, or whatever it is.
Because guys bond by doing things with people, you know, so you gotta do something with the baby. Yeah. No.
Sure.
Yeah.
I have a question about like time. I think it's pretty common, and you guys spoke to this, of like you're gonna have to sacrifice a lot of time. So I think the question sort of entails maybe like what y'all got out of some of the mentorship that you had growing up. Was there maybe like a character or sort of like a lifestyle that you guys had that you were like, okay, well maybe we need to be more specific or intentional with like timing certain things out, like, okay, well we know we gotta have dinner by this time, so that way we can actually have time for ourselves. Like, how did that actual planning of the day and was there something that you guys found that was like, okay, we did like a monthly thing to where we kind of got ourselves organized, or like a weekly thing? How did it work, like, practically speaking?
That's a great question. There's been so many practical things we've learned from mentors that I could like rattle off to you that we've learned to try over the years. Like when the kids were really little, we did really try to get them in bed by a certain time because that was our time, and we were like, there's nothing like, you know, 7:30 at night and they're in bed, and we're like, yes, you know. And then another tip we got was hey, when they're really little, like we had 3 little ones and it was hard for us to get out of the house. Someone said, hey, why don't each of you pick a night of the week? And you know that every Tuesday night I can plan something with girls, and every Thursday night he can plan something with guys, so we kind of could have a life, you know? And then as they got older, we had a tradition that when they turned 13, he would do a special trip with each of them to make a memory. And when they turned 16, another one.
Yeah, 10 and then 13.
Oh, it was 10, okay. So we learned some very great practical things from different people about, and then one thing my parents always taught me was the most important times of the day are when they wake up, when they get home from school, and when they go to bed. So it's like
transition times. Transitions.
if you can just focus on those 3 times, even if you're really busy the other times. So just a lot of really practical things that you'll learn from other people, from your friends even. It doesn't even have to be older people, like what works and doesn't work,
Yeah, in some ways, some of the most practical, helpful advice and tips you might come from someone who's got a 2-year-old and you're about to have your first.
Because they're right in it right now.
Well, even their memories of having a 2-month-old are much fresher than ours, are at this point. And it's also 2022, and the world's just a little different than it was. It is. It's just changed so much, So it's a great question. Ultimately, whatever we say today, you're not going to remember by the time you have a kid. But if you have the practice, or if you have that lens, like I was suggesting that you take from us and other people that advise you about, okay, the lens says it's just important to have mentors and people who you can go to for advice and input, then you're going to get the timely advice when you need it, from different people, and it'll help you out. It'll save you from a lot of potential, mistakes or things you could have done, differently than if you had that guidance. But at the end of the day, it's the way I heard your question, the way I first interpreted it was just, that's where you'll experience the sacrifice. And now that as you plan your day, hey, we're gonna go out, even like we're gonna go on a date. Okay, great, we're gonna go on a date. We had this baby for 2 months now, we're ready, we feel like we can leave him or her. All right, well, what do you gotta do? Well, you gotta pump some milk because the babysitter needs to have milk, and you gotta have, there's just stuff you gotta do, time and effort and things you have to do just to get out, to make sure that baby is taken care of so you can get out for a 2-hour date or whatever. But that's just what you do. You embrace that, you go into that. But you give up some of your time that way, sure. It's just what it is.
Well, thank you guys again.
Thanks for having us, guys. Thank you.
I really appreciate your wisdom and your openness, and feel free to ask more questions. Well, I'm volunteering you guys to answer more questions while we, just talk afterwards. But I do want to say our next class is May 21st, so the 3rd Saturday in May, and it's called Loving Your Neighbor, and the Broyles, Noelle and Kevin, are going to lead that one, which is going to be great. And they're going to talk about how you can serve together as a married couple, and also how you can practically serve every day in life, in the grocery store, and also making like long-term plans to serve. So it should be really great. I'm looking forward to that one. But mark your calendars. But again, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love that you guys have this. It's awesome.
I know.